Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Hania are turning over in their graves as the Hamas terrorist organization reveals the magnitude of its enormous defeat and raises a white flag, or did it? In a nighttime raid by the Givati Brigade, the IDF operated in a clinic that had been turned into a Hamas command headquarters. Following the operation, Al Jazeera claimed that one of the agency's photographers was eliminated. So the IDF revealed the truth and the true meaning behind his presence in the facility. Meanwhile, negotiations for a hostage deal with the Hamas terrorist organization continues, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that the less we talk about it in public, the better. But Hamas doesn't agree, and they are talking in public, claiming that in a recent IDF airstrike, several hostages were killed and others were wounded. There is no confirmation of this information, and it is likely that it is simply a psychological warfare tactic. Elsewhere, a report by the British Research Institute, the Henry Jackson Society, exposes how Hamas has lied about the number of fatalities in the Gaza Strip since the start of the war. In southern Lebanon, over 10,000 weapons have been captured by the IDF, while over 1,000 Hezbollah targets were attacked, while IDF soldiers still control most of the Lebanese areas near the border. According to the ceasefire agreement, the Lebanese National Army will begin to deploy in the area this week, but until they can take full control, the IDF will continue to be deployed there in order to protect the border and prevent Hezbollah's re-entry. The stated goal of this operation is to restore the Galilee residents safely back to their homes. Robust security operations have been conducted to make sure that this area is in fact safe for residents to return to their homes, schools, farms, and businesses. However, there is obviously a new security problem to Israel's northwest, and that is the power vacuum left behind by the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. Although Iran has largely pulled out of this country and Russia is also withdrawing most of its forces, there is another regional player, also very unfriendly towards Israel, who looks set to replace them. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 437 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, all the Shiite militias in Syria, Iraq. All of them are acting under the directives of Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. Before we start, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I also want to introduce you to the sponsor for today's video, the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI. This research organization reviews all the media portals in the Middle East to bring a comprehensive daily summary for consumers. It's very helpful for those of us who cover the news, and I'll tell you more about them later on in the video. But first, forces of the Givati Brigade under the command of Division 162 and in cooperation with the Shin Bet deployed on Sunday evening to raid a terrorist concentration point in a Beit Hanun area in the northern Gaza Strip. This followed preliminary intelligence information about the presence of terrorists in that area. The operation was successful in taking dozens of terrorists off the battlefield, including several who were arrested and interrogated. In a related story, soldiers of the Kfir Brigade continued sweeping operations in the Bet Lahia area, eliminating terrorists from the air and the ground and capturing weapons and ammunition, intelligence information, and other supplies useful for Hamas. Also on Sunday, the IDF moved against a concentration of terrorist activity in a building in the northern Gaza Strip, which previously served as the Abu Shabak clinic. The IDF forces found many weapons in this building and pointed out that the terrorists used the building for military purposes because they thought that the IDF would not attack it as it was previously designated as a medical clinic. The Air Force also carried out strikes in Gaza City on a terrorist cell which the intelligence echelon assessed to be on the verge of launching attacks against IDF troops in that area. A statement by the Air Force emphasized that prior to the strikes, many steps were taken to reduce the likelihood of harming civilians, including the use of precise ammunitions, aerial surveillance, and additional intelligence information. In a similar way, the Air Force also hit a building in the Gaza village of Nusirat on Sunday that is designed as a civil defense facility. But at the same time of the strike, it was being used as a meeting place for what was left of the leadership of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations in that area. The IDF and the Shin Bet stated in a joint announcement that in the operation, Ahmed Bakr El-Luch, a former platoon commander in the Central Camps Brigade of the Islamic Jihad, was eliminated. El-Luch also worked as the photographer for Al Jazeera, so the pro-Hamas Qatari network issued a condemnation of this termination. The IDF statement on the incident reads as follows: "The terrorist organizations systematically violate international law, cruelly exploiting civilian institutions and the population and using them as human shields for terrorist activities. The IDF will continue to act with strength and determination against terrorist organizations that use civilians and civilian institutions as shelters." Once again, I invite you to take a moment to click the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground and help us share the truth. Our next story comes to us from a British research institute, the Henry Jackson Society, which published a report this week highlighting Hamas's manipulations of the death toll in the Gaza Strip since the start of this war. The report claims that Hamas inflates the figures to amplify the impression of harm to innocent civilians and to cause international pressure on Israel. International media outlets and even courts in The Hague take the Hamas statistics at face value, despite the lack of independent confirmation or even attempts at fact-checking. According to the report, Hamas mixes fighters with civilians and even changes the identities of the dead. For example, men killed in battle are recorded as women or children, and the name Muhammad appears in the lists even for those who clearly do not match the report. Hamas also reported natural deaths, such as chronically ill patients who died from causes unrelated to the fighting, or people who died before the war even began as casualties of the Israeli strikes. The report's researchers also noted that Hamas uses the Gaza Health Ministry to spread the inflated data, some of which include civilians that were killed by Hamas gunfire instead, or in other incidents such as the explosion of improperly aimed charges. In one case, a 17-year-old boy named Muhammad, who was shot by Hamas while trying to take food from an aid shipment, was reported as having been killed by an Israeli airstrike. The Henry Jackson Society warns that using these data without verification creates a misleading narrative that portrays Israel as indiscriminately aggressive. The report calls on media outlets and international organizations to cross-check data and verify their reliability before publishing them. The researchers conclude that reliable reporting is necessary to prevent Hamas manipulations aimed at shaping public opinion and strengthening its status in the international arena. In a related story, indirect talks between Israel and Hamas over the issue of a long-term ceasefire and the release of the Israeli hostages continued in recent days, but the gaps between the parties are reported to be still quite significant. Hamas is willing to release only a small number of hostages, while Israel insists on a broader release. In addition, there are disagreements over the identity of the hostages that are about to be released. According to reports, the deal will be implemented in stages, with the first stage including the release of women, children, and adults in exchange for the 7-week ceasefire. Hamas officials claim that they have given all possible concessions, including a gradual withdrawal from sensitive areas such as the Rafah crossing and the Philadelphia route. However, they are under heavy pressure from Qatar and Egypt to go further. In Israel, senior officials say there is unprecedented progress, and they estimate a deal can be reached within a few weeks, but final agreements have not yet been achieved. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu clarified that the talks are being conducted discreetly to prevent political sabotage, and according to him, the less we talk, the better. Elsewhere, a senior Hamas official in Turkey admitted in an interview with Saudi media portals this week that the organization has been in deep crisis since the October 7th attack, which led to the destruction in Gaza and internal crises. According to him, Hamas leadership is drowning in a sea of blood and crisis and has no clear direction for action. In the background, the Syrian regime demanded that the Palestinian terrorist organizations, including Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, leave the country. However, it is unclear at this point if the new rulers of Syria will continue to insist on this demand. At the same time, there are reports that some of the organization's senior officials have begun taking steps to move to Iran, but there too, there is fear of assassinations. In Qatar, where the Hamas leadership still operates, its senior officials were asked to lower their profile and avoid public gatherings or conflict with journalists. The official noted that a hostage deal may slightly improve the leadership situation, but the situation in Gaza remains difficult. In a parallel development, there is a growing sense of optimism that a settlement in the Gaza Strip will pave the way for a normalization agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This would likely be quickly followed by normalization agreements with Indonesia, Malaysia, and possibly other Muslim-majority countries, but there are many obstacles to overcome, and the timeline for such an agreement is unclear at this moment. Meanwhile, United States President-elect Donald Trump's advisor, Adam Boehler, is expected to arrive in Israel for meetings on the hostage issue soon, emphasizing the international involvement in the talks. Before we continue, I get a lot of questions in the comment sections of these videos about where we get the information that we pass on to you. You know, we talk a lot in our shows about what's happening in the Arab world and how it's affecting Israel, and we always try to stay on top of these issues so we can give you, our viewers, the most updated news. Of course, we have a great research department, but one of the best resources I've found lately is a site called MEMRI. MEMRI is a US-based research institute with offices in Jerusalem, constantly monitoring media portals in the Arab world as well as Russia and China, basically bridging the language gap for us in the West. This is crucial for Western media, academia, and even legislators and governments, as well as the public at large. They even monitor extremist mosques and Islamic organizations through social media platforms inside the United States. Their work, I believe, is vital in unveiling the dangerous Islamic ideological currents that threaten Western civilizations and values. So, if you want to stay informed and alerted about the extremist narratives that constitute the basis for hostile and violent anti-Christian activities, you must subscribe to MEMRI. Their address is www.supportmemri.org. The subscription is free, but in order to help them keep uncovering the truth, please consider making a donation. They are a non-profit organization, so it's tax deductible as well. But more importantly, they are truly helping in our war for a better world. So go visit them at supportmemri.org and help them in this great mission. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the news. About 3 weeks after the ceasefire on the northern border took effect, the Lebanese National Army has begun to deploy in the south of the country, but most of the area near the border is still controlled by IDF soldiers. 2 divisions are active in this sector, including Division 91, the Galilee Division in the eastern sector, and Division 146, the largest reserve division in the IDF in the western sector. Further north, the Lebanese National Army has moved in to set up positions, while there are reports that Hezbollah continues to operate in some areas even though the ceasefire they agreed to include a provision for them to all be withdrawn north to the Litani River. The Lebanese National Army has begun to search for the rocket launchers and other equipment that Hezbollah is supposed to have left behind in these areas, and scattered reports indicate that they have had some successes in capturing or demolishing some of this equipment. Across the eastern sector, soldiers from the Galilee Division, most of them are from the Golani Brigade, operate in 10 different focal points on forward defense missions. The fighters carry out ambushes and patrols with a permanent presence in some places and a dynamic presence amongst the frontline villages, which were cleared from Radwan forces that threatened to invade the Galilee. According to the IDF data, the division's forces have already located more than 10,000 different weapons near the border, capturing many and demolishing the rest. Additionally, the forces have attacked more than 1,000 Hezbollah targets and destroyed many terror infrastructures above and below the ground. In about a month, IDF forces are supposed to leave southern Lebanon and transfer responsibility to the Lebanese National Army. Residents of South Lebanon are then expected to return to the villages that they left about a year and a few months ago after the fighting began. But the residents of Lebanon have not yet been exposed to the ruin, the destruction that awaits them when they return to their villages. The IDF systematically acted against all the villages close to the Israeli borderline, which served as bases of the organization Hezbollah to attack Israel when the leaders of Hezbollah and the Iranian masters decided to do so. In many of the structures in these villages, IDF forces found numerous weapons, including rocket launchers and anti-tank missiles. Hundreds of such missiles were fired directly at Israeli civilian communities over the past year, causing widespread destruction and damage. According to estimates, during the battles over the past 15 months, thousands of Hezbollah fighters were killed and many more were wounded. In addition, the IDF estimates that it has captured or destroyed about 70% of the weapons, ammunition, and equipment that Hezbollah has positioned near the border to use in their planned invasion of North Israel. The IDF knew what it was getting into when it started the ground invasion into southern Lebanon, and it brought massive firepower to deal with the forces it expected to oppose the incursion. It was a much more powerful force than what was deployed in the 2006 Second Lebanon War, according to officers in the Northern Command. A tour of southern Lebanon gives stark testimony to all of this, as many of the villages that Hezbollah intended to use as launch points for their invasion of the Galilee have been razed to the ground, and many underground tunnels and bunkers have also been destroyed. This is the price that Lebanon has to pay for Iran's decision to use their country as a tool against Israel, and if you ask me, Iran should be the country which pays for all of these villages to be rebuilt. Now that the outcomes of the campaign are clear, one can say that Hezbollah acted with overconfidence, acting out of pride, which cost them thousands of their best fighters and most of their leadership, along with billions of dollars worth of weapons, ammunition, infrastructure, and equipment. When the residents of southern Lebanon return to their villages, they will see the picture of Hezbollah's defeat and the stupidity of Hassan Nasrallah and the rest of the Hezbollah leadership. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on what's happening on Israel's northern border. Thank you for watching and sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel to help us share the truth. And if you want to stay updated in between the videos, you can visit our news website at tbnisrael.com/news. You can also support our work on this site by donating to our work. Let's move on to the border with Syria, which we're watching here in Israel with great concern, but also some cautious optimism. One source of concern is the growing influence of Ankara, as Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan appears to be indulging in nostalgic illusions about Ottoman control over key sites including Aleppo and Damascus. After the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria, a move that constitutes a huge blow to Iran, Israel is closely following Turkey's conduct and fears significant Turkish footholds in Syria. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement on Sunday evening saying, "A year ago, I said something simple. We will change the Middle East, and we are indeed changing it. Syria is not the same Syria. Lebanon is not the same Lebanon. Gaza is not the same Gaza. And the head of the axis of evil, Iran, is not the same Iran. It too has felt our might." We went on to speak about Syria, saying, "We have no interest in confronting Syria. We will determine Israel's policy towards Syria according to the emerging reality on the ground. I remind you that for decades, Syria was an active enemy state against Israel. It attacked us time and again, allowed others to attack us from its territory, and allowed Iran to arm Hezbollah through its territory. However, the Prime Minister wishes to clarify, we are committed to preventing Hezbollah's rearmament as well. This is an ongoing test for Israel. We must stand up to it, and we will stand up to it. I say to Hezbollah and Iran unequivocally, to prevent you from harming us, we will continue to act against you as required in every arena and at any time." His words came following a statement on Saturday by rebel leader al-Julani, the de facto new leader of the country, who said that Syria is exhausted, so we have no intention of entering into struggles or confronting Israel. We will act to create relations with the international community. That sounds good, and so do many of the other comments that this man has made recently. This leads us to feel some cautious optimism, but we're also wary, and we know that al-Julani might not be the one making all the decisions in Syria. It's also possible that he's waiting for a moment when he can take a more confrontational stance against Israel. Therefore, Israel is not in a hurry to be excited about all these messages that are passed by al-Julani. An Israeli source said regarding the statement, "The man is a radical jihadist identified with Daesh, ISIS, and the attempt to present himself to the West as a moderate at this moment is unfounded." Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in Syria, and for more information on the fall of the Assad regime and Turkey, it's worth listening to the Weekend podcast with Mati Shoshani and myself at TBN Israel, the podcast on our YouTube channel. Moving on to the border with Jordan, there is growing fear that the domino effect from the rebellion in Syria will reach Jordan and even Judea and Samaria in Israel. Israel is tightening security cooperation with Jordan and the Palestinian Authority in an attempt to block an outbreak that could undermine the rule of King Abdullah and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Jordan has long been contended with criminal gangs from Syria trying to smuggle weapons and drugs through their territory, as well as incitement attempts by the Muslim Brotherhood, by Iran, and by Hamas. The Palestinian Authority is also acting against terror elements in northern Samaria in an attempt to prevent an internal threat. In Israel, there is a real fear of Abbas's rule collapsing even before he dies, as the Palestinian Authority is widely viewed as weak and corrupt. In the event of a collapse, Israel is expected to act militarily to prevent Hamas from taking over Palestinian Authority areas as happened in Gaza in 2007. Once again, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development, and we ask you, keep praying. Pray for the peace of the IDF soldiers wherever they are, in the air, at the sea, or on land. Pray for the return of the hostages in Gaza so they may return home soon. And to illustrate, I want you to have a face and a name to pray for. A hostage called Avinatan Or is a 31-year-old Israeli electrician engineer who graduated from Ben Gurion University in Beersheba in Israel. On October 7, 2023, Avinatan attended Nova Music Festival near the Gaza border together with his girlfriend, Noah Argamani. During a Hamas attack on the festival, both were abducted into the Gaza Strip. A widely circulated video showed Noah being taken away on a motorcycle, pleading for help, while Avinatan was led away separately with his hands tied behind his back. Our God is a personal God, and He wants you to pray on a personal level for the peace of Jerusalem, for the peace of Israel. So please, pick a hostage and pray for them personally. And please continue to pray for the peace in this region. And most importantly, don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And together, we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.